How did your advertisements go? Yeah, do you think that you would sell a lot of that? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it would probably be really good. Okay, let's get back to Dr. Seuss. How did this actually go from advertisements to books? An editor of Viking Books saw the Flit advertisements and hired Ted to illustrate a book of mistakes made by school children. So Ted found himself drawing pictures for silly quotations like Benjamin Franklin produced electricity by rubbing cats backwards. The book was published in 1931, and to Ted's surprise, it became a big hit, and Viking signed him up to do a sequel. So remember, at this time, Dr. Seuss isn't writing the books, he's just illustrating the books. Ted soon realized that he'd actually make more money if he both wrote and illustrated his books. He began looking for the perfect subject for his first book. In 1936, Ted and Helen took a trip to Europe. On the ship ride home, he scribbled picture book ideas in his notebook. Ideas like a stupid horse in a wagon. We don't say stupid in our house. And a flying cat pulling a Viking ship. Nothing just seemed quite right. Meanwhile, the throbbing noise of the ship's engine was driving him crazy. He started fitting words to it. Suddenly he found himself chanting, "And that is a story that no one can beat. And to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street." And there was his story. A little boy walking home on Mulberry Street, a main street in Ted's hometown. Looks for something interesting to tell his father about. All he can see is a plain horse and a wagon. But by the time he reaches his house, he's turned the horse and the wagon into a whole circus parade with blue elephants and a brass band. All the rhymes in Dr. Seuss's books bounce along so naturally that people think they must have been easy to write. But Ted worked really hard. "I know my stuff looks like it rattled it off in 28 seconds, he complained, but every word is a struggle. For one picture book, he might write and tear up 500 or even 1,000 pages. Finally, Ted was happy with, "And to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street." He started sending it to publishers. So publishers are people that take the ideas that somebody's written and then say, "Yes, I'll make this into a book." They all rejected it. Most editors found it was just too different. They thought the verse was rough and silly. Worst of all, it didn't have a moral. Like it didn't have like if you do this, this is a good thing. They just thought it was silly. It wouldn't help make children behave better. Like we think of Mr. Rogers. He was good with making moral choices available to children to make them behave better. "What's wrong with kids having fun without being preached at?" Ted yelled. Ted was about to give up when he ran into another friend from Dartmouth. Marshall McClintock had just that day become the children's book editor for Vanguard Press. Vanguard often published books that were different. They were delighted with the book and immediately said yes. Ted was so grateful. He named the hero in the book Marco, after McClintock's son. Reviewers loved Mulberry Street, and it sold very well for a children's book. But during the Depression, people didn't have a lot of money to spend on children's books. To make a living, Ted had to just keep doing ads. He said he couldn't tell if he was a real author or just a lowly advertising man. His second book was inspired by one of his favorite things, hats. He and Helen liked to travel. Everywhere they went, he would buy hats. Maybe a fireman's hat from Peru or a fancy European helmet. Sometimes when he got stuck while writing, he would just put on a hat as a thinking cap. One day, Ted would invite the most famous hat of all and put it on a cat. But for now, what book is that? Yeah, The Cat in the Hat. But for now, he wrote The 500 Hats of Bartholomew Cubbins. Ted and Helen had recently learned that they couldn't have children. Later, Ted said he hadn't wanted kids anyway. They made him nervous. "You have them, I'll amuse them," he would tell people. But his niece actually believed that really deep down, he would have loved to have children. He dealt with the sad news in his own way. He invented a daughter named Chrysanthemum Pearl and dedicated his new book to her. He and Helen sometimes included Chrysanthemum Pearl on their Christmas cards, along with other imaginary children, such as Norval, Wickersham, and Thnud. With 2 children's books out, the name of Dr. Seuss was becoming well known. Ted has always pronounced his name. I find this stuff's just so interesting. He had always pronounced his name in the German fashion, Seuss, but most of his readers said Seuss. Ted liked that this rhymed with Mother Goose, so he started saying Zeus too. Dr. Seuss. Random House, a much bigger publisher than Vanguard, became interested in Dr. Seuss. Then other people said, I want to publish. So, how could he resist? He decided to go with Random House. They stayed the publisher for the rest of his life, and over the years, he became close friends with many of the people he worked with there. His first book for them was not what Random House had hoped for. He wrote a book for grown-ups that was full of pictures that weren't appropriate. It did not go very well, and they said, no, you're gonna go back to writing children's books. One day around 1939, at least this is the story that he tells people, Ted left his window open. The wind blew around some doodles he'd left out. When he came back in, there was a drawing of an elephant on top of a tree. Why would an elephant be in a tree? Was he hatching an egg? Ted named the elephant Horton. But he got stuck trying to figure out what should happen to him. I'm very upset, Helen told a friend, because Ted has that elephant up in a tree and he doesn't know he's going to get him down. It was Helen who finally came up with the ending. Horton would hatch an elephant bird like the flying cow she'd once seen doodled on Ted's notebook. They sound like a perfect couple for each other. Ted loved Horton Hatches the Egg more than anything else he'd ever written. He told his editor that it was the funniest children's book ever. Everyone else loved it too. And Horton the Elephant is still one of Dr. Seuss's most beloved characters. But by the time the book came out in 1940, Ted was not thinking about elephant birds. He was worried and unhappy of what was going on in the world. World War II had just broken out in Europe. Remember, where was he from? Germany, that's right. And Germany was now controlled by Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. Hitler wanted to rule all of Europe. Most Americans hoped that the United States would stay out of the war, but not Ted. Even though he hated war, the Nazis had to be stopped. And so he thought maybe his funny drawings could convince people to fight Hitler, just as they convinced people to buy Flit. So he turned his attention to war and didn't write another children's book for 7 years. 7 years he took off. And we're gonna hear next time what he did in those 7 years. But for now, what I want you to do is I want you to take some time and I want you to work on your own children's book. Write a book and illustrate it, do your own drawings, and show us what it looks like. You can take some time. You might not get it done today. If you're younger, you can get your parents to write the words for you as you do the pictures, and just have fun with it. Who are your characters going to be? What's going to happen? What kind of adventure is it going to be on? Tell about your day, whatever you want it to look like. And then another fun activity would be watch Horton Hears a Who, which is based off of his book about Horton the elephant. So thank you and have a fabulous day.